Thank you so much for coming to our panel session on media and gender. So my name is Su-Mei Thompson, and I am CEO of the Women's Foundation. Hello, lots of familiar faces. And one of our key goals at TWF is to challenge gender stereotypes. And as such, the role of media in creating and exacerbating gender biases is an important area for us. And we're actually making a documentary on this topic called She Objects, or She Objects, get it? Right, and Nicola is actually directing this documentary for us. So we know that media has a profound impact on who we are, our tastes, attitudes, and the kind of beliefs that we have. Some of you, I know, came to my TED Talk earlier this year, thank you, when I spoke about the thinness ideal promoted by beauty ads on billboards and magazines, and how this encourages eating disorders, which are increasing exponentially in Hong Kong. And according to a YouGov poll of 16 to 30-year-old women in Hong Kong, 90% of us think about our weight all or some of the time. And this is concerning when you think that half the people with eating disorders actually meet the criteria for mental depression. And a recent UK study found that girls between 11 and 13 are more anxious, unhappy, and lacking in confidence than 5 years ago. So we know from our work at the Women's Foundation how low self-esteem for girls holds them back in very significant ways. According to research by Dove, 6 out of 10 girls choose not to do something because they don't want to draw attention to the way they look, including not participating in classroom debate, or worse, not turning up to school at all. So our film, She Objects, will look at the link between the media portrayal of women and body image and self-esteem issues, and we'll also look at 2 other important areas. The first is violence against women, and secondly, the leadership ambition gap. So we know that young girls and boys take their cues from movies and TV programs about what is masculine, what is feminine, and about what the cool kids of their generation are doing. And I believe the pandemic of campus rape that we're seeing in the US, where 1 in 4 girls who is starting college this semester will be sexually assaulted before she graduates. I believe that there is a link between this and how the movies glamorize a male-centered partying culture where boys, men drink to get over their social inhibitions, and girls are largely caricatured as sex objects. Now, at the same time that impressionable boys are absorbing these lessons about how to earn respect as a man, they're getting the message that women are less valued. And it's a short step from here to the belief that women should be submissive and sexually available. Now, we know that domestic and sexual violence are learned behaviors. So we need to reach boys before they learn to abuse girls, provide them with alternative ideas about manhood to counterbalance the hypermasculine posturing and misogyny that they're encountering in popular culture. And we know, why is this important in Hong Kong? Well, it's important because incidents of sexual harassment among even Hong Kong secondary students are on the rise. And sex offenders are getting younger, with the number of offenders aged between 11 and 13. 11 and 13, yes, tripling over the last 4 years. So moving away from violence, the third area that our film is going to look at is the leadership ambition gap and the way that media diminishes women, and how that is contributing to that ambition gap. And drawing on the film, we're going to be launching a media literacy campaign in secondary schools, and we also hope to spark informed debate and a call to action among the broader community to object to media content that objectifies, sexualizes, and diminishes women. So these are the issues that our panelists and I are going to be exploring today. We're very fortunate to have a great panel. You had a great session earlier. And I'm really excited about rehashing and maybe expanding on the discussion from just now. So we have Carlo, head of Kering Asia Pacific, Dr. Mario Liong, assistant professor from Centennial College, Shannon Van Sant, an editor at Wall Street Journal, and Nicola Fan, film director. So yeah, I'm sure you've seen their impressive bios. I won't go into any more detail there. But to get us started, we're going to show you the trailer for She Objects. And it really touches on some of the themes that I've mentioned and that we're going to be discussing. So can you roll?
我想隻腳瘦啲，
條腿要幼啲啦。我唔知啲女仔腿粗。
都有好多人話我個樣好怪啊，可唔可以成個樣都執過？
瘦多5、6磅啊，7、8磅，可以再靚啲咯，女仔嘛。
唔使成日用好貶義嘅詞講我話肥妹乜嘢，我唔中意㗎，其實。即係唔減肥就要自暴自棄咯，好似喺度話。
點解嗰個物質已經咁豐盛啦？見到現代人仲係咁唔滿意自己嘅？
佢係 P 咗成3個幾鐘都仲 P 緊嗰幅相喎。
喺傳媒裏邊公認地大美人係只係得5% 嘅女性，至於個95%唔符合靚嘅個標準嘅時候，唯有係通過嗰啲嘅產品，佢先可以提高翻佢嘅自信。
依家呢個時勢，好多香港人都做援交，追求啲好貴嘅嘢啦。佢哋
女性一定係 sex appeal 噶啦，因為佢會吸引到嗰個注意力㗎，冇辦法。
12、13歲嘅時候，我都會睇下啲比較性暴力嘅嘢都有嘅。
以前啲色情文化，大家係收收埋埋去睇嘅，但係而家好入屋。
好多人同我講話，你瘦就會成功㗎啦，瘦咧我就會可以攞到獎㗎啦。好驚人哋會點樣睇自己咯。
其實人生裏邊，身邊嘅每一個人都會有高、矮、肥同埋瘦㗎啦。咁點解樂壇入邊唔可以有嘅？
Yeah. Well done, Nicola. If you like the trailer, come and see the film. So, Nicola, let's start with you. You did a lot of research before you made this documentary. What was it that stood out for you in the research that, surprised or maybe even shocked you?
There were two facts that really stood out to me and I thought was even very shocking. So one of them was how young girls are more anxious and unhappy, just comparing to 5 years ago. And I thought, so what happened in these recent years? We all know that media has long been glamorizing things through the most beautiful celebrity faces, along with long hours of touching up and editing, in which young girls take these as realistic references to compare themselves with. So what happens when this mentality is also brought forth onto social media platform? So just like what we see on the media, everyone wants to present or even create their best versions of themselves online. And that everyone has a chance to finally be a celebrity as well. And so this year, a study conducted by a UK broadcasting company, it has found that among 16 to 25 years old, an average of 16 minutes and 7 attempts is spent on getting a selfie. And I've seen my friends spending hours getting ready for a perfect photo to put on Instagram, and even thinking about what time to post it on so they get the most exposure. And of course later on, drowning in their own phones, waiting and looking for comments and likes. And in a way, this behavior is actually becomes a habit of constantly assessing yourself, and a tendency to rely on validation from others. So I mean, it's no wonder why young people these days are more anxious and unhappy. So another shocking thing I found was that the age of sex offenders in Hong Kong are getting younger and younger, and even for me, in recent years, I've seen more and more news of young kids displaying abnormal sexual behavior, Just to quote a recent case that happened in August this year in Tuen Mun. There was a case where it's involved 3 kids, two boys of age of 11 and 13, and a 11-year-old girl. So the 2 11-year-olds are boyfriend and girlfriends, and then the guy brought the girl to his 13-year-old guy friend, and somehow they just started chatting, and then things took a turn, and they even started having sex in the back stairways of their residential building. And then the boyfriend of that girl was just stood aside and started taking photos and filming it. And of course, eventually they got caught actually through the CCTV in the building. So, to quote one of my interviewees in the film, he asked his audience at a school lecture, he says, where do young kids learn this behavior? Is it from school? Did the teachers teach them to do this? Or did the parents teach them to do this? Most likely not. But what's likely that happened was they probably learn it from the media, because when they want to seek answers, they will look into the media to find answers, and we all know the media has all these different voices. So, and back in the day, back in the day, to watch TV at home, you need a permission from your parents, and you're already lucky enough to have one computer in the household. But now, with the convenience of smartphones, everyone has easy access to anything online, and without having the parents to know about it either. So we know that younger and younger kids are accessing to adult content in a much more convenient way. So there's also, and of course, there's also a lot of shocking facts that we've discovered, and we'll be displaying we'll be addressing in the film as well.
Thank you, Nicola. Thank you. Carlo, can I turn to you? So, you represent kind of red carpet glamour here, right? Kering has these wonderful brands like Gucci and Stella McCartney and so on. But you've just recently entered into a partnership with the Cannes Film Festival that doesn't focus so much on women in front of the camera, but women behind the camera. Can you tell us what you're trying to achieve with that?
Absolutely, and thank you for having me here. We, as a Kering, we signed off this 5 years partnership with Cannes Film Festival. This year has been the first year. And in Cannes Film Festival, we had and we have a section called Women in Motion. And the main reason for that is to encourage dialogue and about the role of women in the film industry behind the camera. Now, why we are doing that? I'd love to share just a few figures, which I believe just speak by themselves. Well, first, from the creation of the Oscar in the United States, from the very beginning, there have been only 4 women nominated as Best Directors. That was in 1977, Lina Wertmuller for Pasqualino, 1993, Jane Campion for The Piano Lesson, 2004, Sofia Coppola for Lost in Translation, and 2010, Catherine Bigelow for The Hurt Locker. 4 at the very beginning. Out of 4, only 1, Catherine Bigelow, actually happened to win the Oscar for Best Director. And Jane Campion is the only woman to have won the Palme d'Or with The Piano Lesson in 2003 in 68 years. Now, if you look at the women representation in the movie industry, 12% only are protagonists in movies, 12, 1, 2. 30% of major characters for secondary roles. And if you look into the characters women has been traditionally and typically casted in movies, those are 89% nurse, secretary, 81%, teacher, 57%, waiters is 53%, cashier, 47% in movies in 10 years, 1995, 20 years, 2015 in the US. So we believe that's quite meaningful. And well, to use a major understatement, I think there's been kind of an underrepresentation of women in the movie industry. And I don't think, by the way, it's just a topic for the US, although the data reported here are most relevant to that market. And the result of that is definitely, we believe, a massive cultural impoverishment in the movie industry. So that's why we came to the determination, which is a lot of work for us, to have this partnership with the Cannes Film Festival, because we just need to boost and nourish much more dialogue and awareness on those topics. And ideally and possibly, and we'll do our very best, to achieve that result, have much more representation of women and behind the camera.
I was sharing with the panel earlier on that I went to see the premiere of Spectre, the new Bond movie, last night. And well, I have to say, actually, I enjoyed it very much because I'm a huge Daniel Craig fan. But looking at the film through this lens of this discussion, there are only 4 women with speaking parts, and 3 of them go to bed with Bond. I mean, so I know. So Shannon, can I turn to you? I mean, what Carlo is saying there, is basically about, that tagline of the Gina Davis Institute, which is, if you can see it, you can be it, right? But if you can't see it, then it is a lot harder for girls to aspire, right, to be leaders or, to be, kind of powerful agents in society. So, would love to hear, what your thoughts are on this. But also, I think, the other side of the coin is that, you often see quite mainstream media being quite critical of women, focusing really unduly on their appearance and not the substance of their actions. And I remember seeing a mainstream news report on Hillary Clinton going to Afghanistan three or 4 years ago, and it was a female newscaster, and she said, "Did you see Hillary looking like 100 years old?"
Yeah, I think these comments are about, say, women in the public eye or women in the media are very common. And I think there's like an essential reductive aspect to the media towards all kinds of people, men and women, where you want to reduce somebody to something that is easily identifiable, can be put in a box, can be labeled, can be kind of dealt with in an easier way. And so when I was an assistant at a couple of TV networks in New York, and after that as well as a journalist, I remember behind the scenes people making comments, say, about Christiane Amanpour and criticizing her wrinkles and saying we should take her off the air. I mean, she looks like an old hag, like very misogynistic statements by fairly prominent male television producers. And I personally, as well, have had this experience. I filmed a lot of documentaries that are investigative and on human rights. And several years ago, I made a film on North Korean refugees escaping through China and Laos to Thailand. And it was a very intense experience and a profound story on human rights. It took a lot of different skills to make that happen, as you can imagine. And I took the film to New York at one of these traditional networks, and the reaction of one of the TV executives I showed it to was entirely focused on my looks. He really wanted to talk about the way I looked on camera and my hair and the way I was moving, and I was like completely dumbfounded. I mean, completely dumbfounded, and I would expect that reaction, say, for something I had done in local news or for a smaller story, but it's like I've just filmed people escaping and running for their lives. So there's this reductive aspect, I think, to society for all of us, and especially for women, and a way in which all women, younger women in Hong Kong, but women in many aspects of life are, say, overly sexualized or reduced in some way. You are a wife, you are a mom, you are a career woman, you are this, you are that, as opposed to sort of embracing all of us as really full human beings and capable of so many things. And I think more broadly in terms of the representation of women in film and in television, I think Angelina Jolie, I saw an interview where she spoke to this, and I had a friend as well call me up recently with this question, and my friend Frederique, she's this very powerful, interesting archaeologist in China, she's French, and she said, "Shannon, when was the last time you saw a movie or a TV show about a woman where the focus of the story was on her personal journey and her growth as a person, and it was not about the romance or the man in her life or the sort of She was not an accessory to somebody else's journey. And I had a really hard time thinking of it. And as a storyteller, every story I tell, I try to have that growth of a character, this sort of arc in their development. But I think as women, we need to press for more stories where it's about a woman's journey. And when there are more films and TV shows and, say, news stories about that, that will affect the way that, of course, we see ourselves and the way that women recognize what is possible for their lives.
Very inspiring. Maria, can I turn to you? So you're in the trailer saying that pornographic images are now ubiquitous. Can you expand a bit on that, and also how it maybe relates to kind of maybe the power dynamics that hold women back?
I was making the comment, actually, I was referring to these sexualized images of women. So these are like what we call females, sexy female models, or some people would call them pseudo models. So they were young girls. Maybe some of them, they started off their career as a model for some amateur photographers, or they might be showgirls promoting some electronic products or comics. So some of them, they gain support from some media companies to produce some really sexy, sexualized photo albums to promote themselves. And a lot of these photo albums actually resemble the pornographic content or like poses, because if you know, like in Hong Kong, especially Japanese pornography is actually very popular among the teenage population. So these companies actually target these photo albums at the teenage boys and young men. So they would use a lot of these like Japanese pornographic content to sell it to these population. But because they are the underage, so they have to strategically edit some of the pictures to make it legal to sell it and distribute it to the teenage population. So we can see like they're intentional, okay, in pushing these kind of sexualized images to young people, young boys. And in addition, so like even newspapers and tabloid magazines would report on these female models, and of course focusing on their sexualizing them, and also focus on their body parts. And because a lot of these printed media are actually common readings in local households, so in the past, like pornography was actually consumed privately, but now like these kind of images are just prevalent. And I conducted some focus groups with some college men, and they told me actually they discuss these models with their male peers, and also with their parents and also family members. So like one of them told me, like in one of their family gathering, actually relatives actively brought up these discussion on the female sexy models. And of course, in their discussion, they use a lot of these very sexual languages and discuss the models in a very objectifying way. So even like the college men felt embarrassed to hear that kind of comments. So when I talked to some of the college women, so some of them, they hated these kind of images because they thought that these are very demeaning to them. But some of them, they actually would compare themselves to these models. So just like what Nicola have mentioned earlier, so women would take these media images as real. So they would criticize themselves of having too small breasts or like being too fat, and they would go for dieting or do a lot of things to make them look slimmer. And so somehow these sexy model phenomenon intensifies the self-objectification of women. And for men, so like what we actually saw in the trailer. So the discussion on among men on female bodies is considered natural and normal, and they think that it is so acceptable to discuss female bodies. So the college men I talked to, they said that they would discuss even, extend the discussion on female bodies even to their female acquaintances, friends, and female classmates. So I think these female sexy model does play a very important role in creating and encouraging these kind of sexualized culture in Hong Kong.
Carlo, I want to turn to you and the beautiful gold and silver ribbon badge that you're wearing and ask you to explain its significance, but also to say that Kering has very actively supported a number of films that look at sexual violence, including Brave Miss World, which is about a Miss World candidate who was raped, and The Hunting Ground, which is a relatively new film about campus rape in the US. Why do you as a company care so much about stopping domestic violence?
Yeah, that's we've been quite often questions about this, and well, just a little bit of a digression to start with. We believe that the fashion industry do have a quite influential impact, all in all, on society. So we set trends, and we believe we have the privilege, at the same time the burden probably to influence on matters. So we are working on that flag, and well, all in all, our chairman and CEO François Pinault has been very vocal in making for our group a very strong statement that we want to be a sustainable fashion group. For us, sustainability stands on many layers. It's about environment, and I invite you to have a look what we've been doing about that. But it's also about women empowerment and more generally the ability to be socially relevant. Now, it is his personal conviction that violence against women is a universal and global tragedy, no matter society you're in, no matter geographies or cultural environment, is there, is global. But at the same time, it's his conviction that it is an orphan cause, because there is a very strong code of silence we want to work on, and we believe that's an area where we have and we want to have something to say. Now, 4 years ago, for these reasons, we set up a Kering Foundation. The Kering Foundation has been originally set up in France, where other headquarters are, and then expanded in different regions and parts of the world. And the Kering Foundation key objective and role is just to promote awareness and actions against violence on women. Now, the way the Kering Foundation works is focusing on 3 geographies and 3 themes. So when it comes to Europe, Western Europe, the key themes that Kering Foundation is working is about all traditional practices, which are considered sort of socially violence. And when it comes to the US, there is a very strong focus on sexual violence. And when it comes to Asia, and the focus for us will be to start with in Hong Kong and China, it's about domestic violence, because we believe, although it's a very sensitive topic for many reasons, it's an area we need to exploit. And so we are working along those, and it's my responsibility in this part of the world, together with our team here, to work on those. And the way we will work on those, and we are working on those, is actually to partner with absolutely prominent NGOs and associations. And thank you so much, Su-Mei, and we've been working together on this, and we'll be working even more, I hope. And in China too, where we already planted seeds to work with an NGO there, and mapping and trying to plan actions, concrete actions on those topics. Now, the pin I'm wearing here is a good example, and thank you for mentioning that. It's been designed by Stella McCartney. It's simple, but it's pretty nice in my view. But the way we made it last year for the first time is to have is to celebrate. It's for the 25th of November. As you may know, 25th of November is International Day for the fight of violence against women, and this is our contribution to that. We do have a powerful network in the region. We employ more than 10,000 people. And that's again, and I think we'll be leveraging on our people to be ambassadors for this, and of course working closely also with NGOs and associations.
So for anyone who wants to pick up a pin, where can we get one?
Just set an email and you have the address, or just come back to us, and we'll definitely take care of it. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Right, Nicola and Shannon, I'd like to turn to you. So, we've been hearing from the stats, and Carlo saying, so few women have won an Oscar, right? But you're both professional filmmakers, content creators. Right? Do you feel a sense of responsibility as a role model for other women? And kind of linked to that, one of the great things, of course, about the internet and social media is that we can all now be content creators and publishers. And we've seen blogs emerge like Everyday Sexism in the UK, which has really given women and girls a voice. Are you encouraged by that?
So I'll speak first to the social media aspect. I think that this social media, blogs, digital media, Facebook, as well as all of the other TV networks and video networks that have come up, say Vice or Al Jazeera, it's really in everything over the internet. It's what we're really seeing is this democratization, this globalization of voices that are heard, and in some ways, the power of these stories is reduced because you don't have so many eyeballs focused on a single show. And when I was growing up in the United States, we had 3 networks and CNN to watch, and now we have so many. But the positive side of that is that it allows so many people, just like myself and like Nicola, to tell our stories. And I think it's given so many people a voice, not just women, but people, say, of unusual backgrounds. One of my favorite filmmakers to follow is he's a Somalian filmmaker who tells really powerful stories about the Islamic extremist movement in Somalia. And he tells his stories or makes films for Channel 4 and sometimes the BBC. I think he's wonderful. And I have a good friend, Simon, who reports for Vice and has a very unique voice. And for me as well, when I was an independent filmmaker in Beijing, I would usually make short films on things that I really felt passionate about. And I had the freedom, if somebody turned me down, to just go to another news outlet. And eventually, even if it was a several-year process, I was able to get the story that I wanted made and have a lot of power over that process and the way that the story was told. So I think it's been a very empowering experience, that aspect of the internet and the web. And I think as a role model, I don't think too much of myself as a role model, but what I try to do, and I don't really at all think about women's issues when I'm making a film. I usually am just attracted to a story or to an issue, and I just make that. But what I like to do now, and as I'm getting older and, say, mentoring younger women, but I would say this is true for men and women and for everybody, is I try to encourage people, and say younger people I work with, to sort of bring their full creative self to the table, both in their personal life and in their professional life, and to not allow themselves to be put in a box, and to really be so true to themselves and their passions and authentically who they are, no matter how eccentric that is. So for me, I love going to Africa sometimes, and I like doing intense stories on the border of South Sudan, but I also love getting manicures and a facial at the Mandarin or whatever it is that I'm doing, right? And for some people, that's really contradictory and impossible. But this is sort of who I am, and embracing your full self in that way.
Beautiful.
Well, Shannon already said it very well. So yeah, social media has definitely been a great platform for sharing and expressing, and it really has opened up a lot of doors for open communication and exchanging ideas, and which ultimately even help shape culture and norms. And and as well as our awareness on the happenings around the world. So as an artist, it has definitely helped me with spreading my work to people. And in general, it has also opened up a lot of opportunities for people in my field. It's empowering in terms of I have a great platform to help push forward my passion, my work, my interests, my voice, and to be in touch with like-minded people as well. To also reach out to potential collaborators, supporters, and be in touch with people I admire, respect, and look up to. But so here's the thing. So since we're all content creators and consumers, it's actually now even more important for all of us to be more media literate and be mindful with what we're contributing to our media environment. And I mean, just so you know that even what looks like a footage shot by someone's iPhone could easily be manipulated or photoshopped as well. So personally, I wouldn't call myself a role model or anything. I think everyone has a different way of living and unique journey through life. But at least for me, out of the million ways to live life, I've chosen to follow my love for design and film.
Fantastic. Okay, I'd like to invite comments or questions from the floor. Don't be shy. I think I'll maybe take them in batches. So would anyone like to start? Right. Nidhi, please. Can we get her a mic? Thanks.
Hello, thank you, Su-Mei, and all the panelists for this really insightful discussion. And I have to say the trailer of She Objects, it really jolted me. My question today is for Shannon, because I was really fascinated by your different experiences, and your work has taken, your brave projects have taken you to some of the most amazing, but sometimes dangerous places. And I'm wondering if that ever made you concerned about your safety, because we are talking about violence against women, and if it ever made you worry about your own safety as a woman professional and as a woman. And the second part of the question is that also when you took these experiences from these various places and went back to your workplace, which is the newsroom or the media room, did you ever feel any bias, or were you ever concerned about, I mean, they're two different, but I'm just wondering about these two aspects from your work. Thank you.
Should I answer? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Didn't know if we should take the questions in batches, as you mentioned. Sure. So absolutely. I've been to several countries in Africa and throughout Southeast Asia, and particularly in Africa, have been and certainly had experiences where I was afraid. There was one, the most extreme experience was I was in the Comoros a couple of years ago. It's an island nation north of Madagascar. It's a Muslim country, but actually women there have a very high status. And it's actually a very safe place, I think, for the most part. But anyway, I got a knock on my door at 7 a.m. and a hotel employee came into my room, and I had to scream at him to get out. And he did. It ended in a peaceful way. It ended up not being a violent experience, but it could have been. And he clearly had his idea of why he wanted to be there. And I say that because I think, these risks are very real. And the fact of the matter is that we can talk about women's empowerment all morning, but in many parts of the world, and maybe even most parts of the world, it's simply not as safe if you're there as a woman. And if you're a journalist or a professional and you have to go to these places, you have to be very clear about the kind of risk that you're taking. And as a company, if you're sending people to these places, I would not refrain from sending women there, but I would certainly be very sophisticated about the kinds of measures you take to make sure that they are protected. So a couple of months ago, I sent a reporter to India, a woman, and I was concerned about her safety, but I made sure she was accompanied and she was traveling with another person. So it's this balance where you don't want to take those opportunities away, but both as the woman and as the company, you want to make sure that you're protected.
How did you feel, first of all,
I would say in television, in American television, and perhaps even with the BBC or Channel 4, I mean, since it's a visual medium, you have this almost a requirement for an even divide between men and women. So you've got a lot of really good examples of women television journalists. Clarissa Ward with CNN, lots of women who are doing great things in dangerous places. And I used to work for Chinese TV, and there was a much greater bias, of course, against women in that environment in all kinds of ways. But I think more broadly, and I would say when I was doing these investigative stories on human rights, I was doing it pretty much as an independent actor. And then I would take that product and then I would then sell it or distribute it to various media networks. So I didn't have to deal with that bias in that way. But I think more broadly speaking, I do think that women, perhaps there's a bias towards not sending them to these dangerous places, but even a diminishment of women that I still occasionally experience, although less now in the workplace, where people don't take you seriously, or they think of you in one way and don't see you as your full self. And so I think that's part of it. And I'm like, excuse me, but I went to South Sudan last year, and I've done this, that, and the other. So, I really need to be reckoned with. And I'm a person at this table that is as sharp and as bright as any other man that's here who probably has not been to those places.
Okay, lessons for all of us, not just working in the media industry, I think. Yeah. Any other questions? Joanna, and then, yeah, we'll take two comments at the same time.
A comment and a question. Picking up on your James Bond point earlier, I think often in the media, women are depicted as belonging to a man in some way, whether they're a wife, a girlfriend, a daughter, a mother, etc. And I know on Hong Kong local TV, there's a lot of depiction of women who've been left on the shelf, so to speak. They haven't been able to find a man, and it's seen as a sort of comedy thing, a funny thing. Do you think it's fine, for media to create comedy in that way, or do you think the media should be held to a higher standard and be more responsible because, knowing that the impact that they're going to have on the viewers?
Very good. Can we take your comment and question too? Well, maybe Mario, do you want to, and Nicola, think of that one?
Sure. My question's actually around the desensitization of sexuality in the media, and it's probably for Mario and Nicola. It comes from a parent perspective. So I have raised a 13-year-old daughter who is really independent in thought. She exudes vibrancy. She'll speak up. She doesn't come from a traditional family where her mum has worked. Her dad's incredibly supportive, and that's gone on for a couple of generations. So she's a kid who's grown up knowing these things and has her own mind. Yet her idols is Kylie Jenner and the Kardashians. And she talks about, she went ziplining in Thailand only a few weeks ago, and she first searched for what did Kylie wear when she went. And I guess the question I'm asking, because to me that completely jars with the child that I'm bringing and everything else that is around her, but the question I ask is how do I help her navigate in a way that is relevant for the world that she lives now, that is meaningful for her, not as a mum of a different generation that comes with judgment around that, because she's all of the things that I would ask for in a child, but yet there is this aspect of what makes her her that to her is not demeaning. It's just the world she lives in.
Great question.
I don't think surplus woman is a funny joke at all. I definitely see that as very toxicating belief in Hong Kong culture, especially. I definitely have friends who worry about that they approaching the age of 30, and that they worry that they're concerned why her boyfriend isn't still proposing to her yet, and she literally gets agitated by it, and that's something I noticed amongst my friends for sure, and it's definitely going into the society, people's mentality of it.
I think these two questions actually demonstrate how media is so, how to say, is treating women badly. Okay, or I should say, put it like this. So, yeah. So I mean, like the discussion over like leftover women have been existed for some years, and yeah, even some of the the TV programs have make jokes about that, and also use it as a way to urge women to conform to the feminine standards or beauty standards. So of course, personally, I cannot accept this, and I think that it is very demeaning to women, and it's a bit sad because after so many years of feminist movement, women's movement in Hong Kong, it seems that these kind of stereotypes are still prevalent and acceptable. Among the general public, and I think and with the rise of women's status in Hong Kong, or more so-called more equal educational and job opportunities, so the criticism towards gender inequality seems more difficult. People can easily find role models, like women leaders, to, so to speak, counter-argue or give as a counter-examples to the criticism towards gender inequality. So I think this is kind of sad, and we really need to raise the gender awareness especially of our youngsters. And I think She Objects is a very good initiative to actually push forward this kind of campaign. Yeah.
Thank you. I mean, just to amplify to your question, Joanna, I think we at Women's Foundation would love to see the media self-regulate and hold themselves to a higher standard, right? But I think that may be a long time coming. I mean, I think it could be expedited if all of us here were to kind of, get onto blogs and things and say we really object to this kind of programming and how demeaning it is. So please, everyone, right, think of yourself as citizen bloggers. But I think there's also an onus on women like us in the room to be mentoring younger women, right? Many of whom do feel this pressure, societal pressure, just to tell them that actually, you have to be able to be happy, right, by yourself. And we, some of you know, run a mentoring program for women leaders. And a couple of years ago, this actually came up as a topic that some of the protégés wanted to discuss in a mentoring circle. And we had, I remember one girl actually say, I'm going to be hitting 30 soon, should I be settling for second best? Right, because second best surely has to be better than no one. And we were actually it was quite interesting because we had a bunch of mentors who were there for the session, and a number of them actually were separated or divorced, right, or single. And you couldn't get better role models, to say actually, you have to learn to be happy by yourself, right? So.
And sorry, to also address your question, I think in Hong Kong culture, it's true that family members tend to avoid the topic of sex in relationships. And it's just somehow awkward to talk about over dinner table. But as a daughter myself,
Understatement.
But as a daughter myself, I really encourage all parents in the audience to communicate openly and honestly with your kids on love and sex, and just nurturing morals and values you would hope your kids to instill when they build sustainable, long-lasting relationships with others, with their partners, with their friends even. And because otherwise, whatever questions they may have that they're not finding through school or home, they will try to seek answers through the many voices in the media environment.
Yeah, and as a fellow mum, I sympathise. My children are slightly younger, but I was very heartened to hear that there are media platforms who are thinking about this, and YouTube have asked Gina Davis to curate a selection of clips on YouTube that are kind of appropriate and still exciting and interesting, and to kind of tweens. So I think you and I should both probably look at that. Yeah, go ahead. Yes.
I think if it was my daughter, because I have two girls as
Which I think that's what her argument is to me. So taken away from
taken away from her appearance and whatever else that she's doing out there, and just talk about that side, which is actually she's a savvy businesswoman.
I guess that was the question I was actually asking for, because she already has that clock. So she's not necessarily going there because it's sexual. She's saying this is a woman who's empowered. And I'm trying to understand, is it my judgment because of the because to her there's nothing wrong with the way she's presenting herself, because that's become the norm. So it was more into the tradition of what you were drawing out in terms of, and how do I help her to see a different way is more. So she's definitely got that. She's not following because it's sexy. She's following because it's fashion, and she sees her as a strong, entrepreneur. Yeah.
May not be winning the Entrepreneur of the Year award here quite yet, but anyway. Right, more comments, questions from anyone? Yes, go ahead. Okay.
So just on the mentoring thing, and I know a lot of the good work you guys are doing, do you know if there are any programs like that for young boys in Hong Kong, and what's being done to address, I think, the male side of it, because there's obviously always two sides of the coin, and just to educate them better about women, what they shouldn't be talking about, how they should be looking, what they're looking at, not looking at, etc., and just how to treat young girls, and then obviously going into womanhood as well.
Well, I'm looking to Mario because I hope he's going to help me out here, because Mario was part of a study by the EOC that looked at the future of men in Hong Kong. But really just to answer your question really more kind of thematically, what has changed for us at the Women's Foundation over the course of the last 5-6 years is the realization that we're never going to get to gender equality if we just keep thinking about it as fixing the women, right? We really, really have to engage men, and we're trying to do that now in many different ways. So, through the 30% Club, which is mainly male chairmen and CEOs who are, they're championing more women on boards. We're launching a male allies, I think, what are we calling it now, Ingrid? Male Champions of Change program to help men who are, sympathetic to the cause, but maybe don't really know, kind of how to really help. To give them some ideas, tips, tools, and also a sense of a cohort and a support network. But one of the things that we're really keen on doing is a study on effective interventions for boys. We really think this stuff has to start so early. And we want to do the study of effective interventions for boys in other parts of the world, and then to take the results of that and to see what we can do to come up with localized recommendations for, kind of whole bunches of stakeholders, whether it's parents or schools and so on. So I may have to answer your question in about a year's time. But Mario, do you know of programs that mentor boys currently here?
Unfortunately, no. Because even like some social service agencies that actually target at men is actually very few. So maybe only 1 to 2 in Hong Kong. Yeah. Not to mention targeted at young people or young men. And I think it's very important to actually start an intervention program to raise the gender awareness of young men, especially because as Su-Mei mentioned, I participated in a study about the men's situation in Hong Kong. So not only young men but also other older middle-aged men as well. But from the focus group we had with the young men, so they did express they had really a lot of pressures on them, urging them to be successful in their career, to actually to have more money in order to be able to attract romantic partners and to get married. So I mean, they do experience gender pressure from because of their gender identity. I think this is a very good starting point to discuss gender with them. So let them know that this is actually not like a struggle between women and men, but is the how to say that the structural factor that actually oppresses both women and men. Yeah.
I mean, you're really onto something, because I mean, we know from our work, which does, a number of programs are, gender awareness and programs for boys and girls, but we know from our work that boys are much more resistant, and they seem to have much more entrenched stereotypes. So, the good news on the flip side is that, girls, if you give them encouragement and you show them positive role models, actually the impact of that is often sustainable. And it's tremendous, right? You can see a real kind of positive surge in their confidence and their aspirations. But boys, even if they change their mindset for a little bit, they fall back very quickly. The impact is not sustainable. I know of another study with an academic that we're working with, and he was talking about how he had done a study of when he'd shared sexually explicit online material with girls and boys. And girls, again, very susceptible to change. So having seen the material, they thought that was kind of how they should behave, right? And much more than likely to acquiesce to unprotected sex or things that they wouldn't have been comfortable with before. But the boys actually didn't make any difference whether you showed them the SEOM or not. They already, if they had a propensity to force their girlfriends to have unprotected sex, they were going to do it anyway. And where does that come from? It's in the kind of cultural DNA here of boys. So yeah, we definitely have to address this. Go on.
Can I just chip in with a few words from the corporate words, although that comes later, but I think it's very relevant. I think we should go beyond compliance on these issues, because the way most of the companies are looking at that is from a compliance perspective, which is good and bad at the same time. We all do within companies in this part of the world as well, sexual harassment trainings. We do whatever we have. We have ethics committees, and we all very committed, and that's very important. But it's definitely far from being enough. So hunting down stereotypes, it is something that within our corporations we've been finding very useful and as a tool to try to influence on behaviors. It's something we've been doing and running in the group for the past few years, and it's been very, very informative. And also within the corporate world, a very firm and authentic commitment to the cause in terms of actions we are delivering is so important, and not just in terms of internal communications, but also in terms of the people and the leaders we wanna groom within our companies.
Okay, so I think we are going to. Oh, okay, yes, please. No, go ahead.
Another area of discussion, and Su-Mei, you raised it in your initial comments about the college culture, and 1 in 4 girls may be assaulted within their 4 years. I've got 3 children, all 3 are in the college ages, and 2 are girls, 1's a boy, and I'm finding, I'd like to have some comments on this whole hookup culture, because it's both conflicting to the boys and the girls, frankly, and I think at some point, with this all the discussion about 1 in 4 girls being assaulted, the positions are skewed against the boys, right? But the whole hookup culture is very conflicting and confusing to both sexes, and I'd just like some feedback and some comments on that, please.
I'm not sure if it's a bit out of my sphere as a TV journalist, but I think it's really about boundaries and about teaching. I think some of the discussion we've had earlier today about the Kardashians and about these women who were sexualized at such a young age. Like when I was back in the States doing local news, I would occasionally do stories at a high school, and I was like shocked by how sexy the girls were dressed, and like cut off tops and just things. I wasn't even that much older at the time, but the society had changed so rapidly, and I think it changed as we're all speaking to and concerned about in a way for somebody of that age, holding up role models that for people of an age group who are still in the process of negotiating their boundaries and what it means to be a man and what it means to be a woman. And I think as a storyteller, perhaps it may relate, because in a lot of the stories that I've tried to do are documentaries, or the way I've tried to sort of live or approach the world is you want to see a man or see a woman or whoever it is, somebody from China or from Africa, as their full self, and look at that person in a sort of deeper way. And I try to explore that in my stories. And I think when you're talking about your kids or these sort of situations, like the hookup culture, really maybe having open and honest conversations with your children about this is romance and this is love and this is sexuality, and here's where they intersect and here's where they don't. And it's very important, whether you're 13 or you're 35, when you're spending time with a partner, that you're sort of seeing them as their full selves. And that's really what our whole discussion is about today, about representation to the media. So I think if I had kids, I don't, but I think I would sort of think about it in that way, and that it's not just an object that you're with right now. The Kardashians make women seem like an object. It's kind of a fun show to watch. I sometimes like watching it. But it's really objectifying, and you're not just, a pair of boobs. Like, you're a full human being, and everybody has their own journey and their own story. And I think if you can encourage that sort of maturity in your kids, then they're going to be able to go into these experiences and treat that other person as a human, whether it's a boy or a girl. So that's how I would approach it.
Okay. So to wrap up, maybe in 60 seconds, if you have a call to action to the audience, or an inspirational thought that you want to leave them after today. So Mario, should we start with you? Come in reverse order.
Yeah. I think we should engage both women and men to join this gender equality campaign.
As participants of the media environment, I think we should all be critical thinkers and mindful creators. Comprehend before we conclude, and think before you type.
Well, I think we will keep doing what we've been doing, that with a very much more strong focus on Asia, and to start with in Greater China as well, so trying to localize as much as we can action, and to I think we continue to communicate massively on this topic, because I think we can be very vocal on that, and that's a tool we as a Kering group will be using, I think, more and more in this part of the world as well.
And I guess I would say, maybe building on the point I just made, that as professional women and men, and as in my case as a storyteller, but to bring our full selves in both our personal life as parents and as professionals, and every part of our life to the table, both in our personal and our professional life, so that the people around us, particularly the younger people, the younger men and women, can see sort of that complexity, and to not kind of live your life inside a box, or put other people in that through your work or through your personal life as well.
Thank you. Please would you join me in thanking our very inspirational and generous panelists. Thank you. Thank you for being such a great audience as well.